Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me. My name is John Stevenson, and welcome to Practicalli Clojure. And today we are going to cover some interesting topics. We've been doing a lot of foreclosure exercises in the recent videos, so this time I'm going to change it up and do some investigation into what's a fairly new tool to use in Clojure, which is the Clojure command line interface tools. And essentially they give you like a new alternative way to be able to start a REPL and work with projects as well. And so they do some of the kind of the essential things that Leiningen and Boot already do as build automation tools. They don't do everything that those tools do, but they do provide other features that you might find very useful. And so I think that at its current state, I don't think you'll be replacing all of your Leiningen and Boot projects yet. But I think Clojure CLI tools is definitely something you would have a look at when it comes to understanding, when it comes to building new projects. I think that's where it really shines, and especially if you're doing things like figwheel-main. I think that's a very good fit. So the whole figwheel-main and Clojure CLI tools are a really good fit. Okay, let's have a look. So if you want to know more about everything we're doing, then please go to the practicalli.github.io page. There's also practical.li as a web page as well. And there we've got links to the study group, all the videos that we've done. So these are on a playlist on YouTube. And there's also some books I'm working on in progress. Probably the SpaceMax books is the most developed one of those. And I'll be working on more and more content on the other books as well. And if you want to get in touch with me, then please reach out via the Clojure Slack channel and or via Twitter or on GitHub as well. Pull requests are always welcome. And if you want to help out, there's some different ways you can support me as well. I'll be doing a ride in September, so some of these videos, so I won't be doing any broadcasts at the start of September because I'll be cycling a very long way in a very short amount of time. Okay, so let's crack on with what we're going to look at today. And so I've put a blog up on my classic blog, which is jrocket.co.uk. And this will kind of guide us through what we're going to cover today. Yeah, so just give you an insight into what Clojure CLI tools are all about, where they're useful, why you'd want to use them, and when you'd want to start using them as well. So first thing is it's pretty simple to install, and we'll see that in a moment. It also gives you a nice experience, nice quick to get going startup experience. You don't have to install lots of tools. And Clojure itself really doesn't need to be installed as such. I mean, the biggest install for Clojure really is the Java virtual machine that you're running on as well. And I do kind of recommend using the adopt OpenJDK versions of Java. These are what Oracle Java is built from anyway, and you don't have any licensing issues there. If you want to work with these as well. And there's most people are still using Java 8, so OpenJDK 8 will be fine. It's a long-term support. Although if you're working on new projects and relatively new libraries in Clojure there and Java, then OpenJDK is kind of the new long-term support. So it might be worth also jumping to that as well. OpenJDK 12 is probably, you may experience some issues in that, but it's probably not the issues that we had when we were going from Java 9 and 10. And Hotspot is quite interesting. OpenJ9 looks quite an interesting kind of alternative. It's kind of come from the IBM version of the Java virtual machine implementation. That's supposed to have a very lightweight and very quick startup time, so that might be an interesting option for like Docker containers and so on if you containerize your deployments. Otherwise, Hotspot is really good and classic and very well supported as well. So that's the biggest kind of install when it comes to Clojure, really, because Clojure itself is essentially just a library. And this assumes you're actually going to do Clojure on the JVM. If you're just going to do Clojure script and you're only going to use like Clojure script, you're not going to use any Java, then you might be able to kind of just use things like Plank or Lumo, which are these self-hosted Clojure script projects. So you don't actually need, there's no dependency on Java there as well. So what does CLI Tools provide? Well, it gives you this nice interactive REPL experience. So again, any kind of Clojure development is vastly beneficial from having a REPL running there. You can evaluate your code straight away, and you can understand exactly what it's doing as you're writing the code as well, and you get that fast feedback loop. We can run Clojure programs as well. So if you don't want to set up an entire project, you can just run a Clojure project. You can just point the CLI tools to a file, and off they go. It will run the project for you. Sorry, it'll run that file for you. And then we can also like manage the dependencies as well. So managing dependencies is probably the biggest kind of difference as well, because we can go and reach into so Git repositories and have a specific commit as the as our dependency that we're pulling in, so we don't need to build jar files as well. So it takes away some of the when you're moving fast and iterating fast on especially on a new project. It takes away some of the kind of constraints you have about having to build jar files and having them deployed and so on. Okay, yeah. So these aren't, so CLI tools aren't going to replace Leiningen and Boots straight away. Although depending on what kind of tools complement the CLI tools, then I can quite easily see that it covers, like most cases for most developers, over the next year or so. So I can see a lot more adoption already happening actually with CLI tools. So let's look at the, so how do we get started? There's a really good getting started guide on cloj.org. So it tells you how to set it up for Mac and Linux. So these are kind of the main ones it works really well on. There's also an installation of Windows. This is still fairly new, so there might be bugs, and we're like obviously seeking out good feedback on that as to what's working and what's not working as well. Let's just put that there. So I'm going to install this on Linux, and because I don't have this installed on my broadcast laptop yet. So let's switch over to a terminal. Boom. So it's just a normal terminal I'm running, and I'm just going to paste that in, Control-Shift-V, and see if hopefully I've got curl installed. Yes, I have. There we go. So it's just downloaded the install script. So I've got an install there. So let's just I'm going to now change modes. So just going to make it executable. It's X install. So now I can run it. And by default, this is going to put this into the user local directory. And I think I can specify a particular directory if I wanted to, but I'm just going to go with the default there as well. So because we're putting it into user local, we'll need to do sudo so we can run as administrator. And I want to run, I'm doing / because I want to run this on the local path. It's not on the kind of system path as well as yet. So if we run this, then it's going to ask me my password. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we've downloaded the install, and then we run the install, and it has now put it into Clojure, user local lib Clojure, and into, so there's some library files in there. Then the executable is in user local bin, and there's also some man pages as well. And it's cleaned up the download as well, so that's quite nice. And it's also prompting us to show us how to actually get started. So let's see if it actually does work. clj-h for help. And oh, it's asking us to install rwrap as well. Or we can use Clojure. So we can use Clojure -h. There we go. We got there in the end. So we can see that this gives us some help on how to actually use it. And it's also a nice description as well. So this really is a Clojure script. So it is a Clojure script, not Clojure script. And it's a runner for Clojure. So it's basically, and the CLJ is a wrapper that will provide this a nice read-line experience. So it allows a bit more interesting editing. That's why I was getting the error, because I don't have, it requires RL wrap to be installed. I can install that in a moment. So essentially Clojure is the main function and CLJ is the wrapper around that to kind of enhance the command line experience really. And so if you're going to run a REPL, then you'll do CLJ as the command and it'll give a nice REPL experience. And then if you're just going to run a file, then you use Clojure, and everything else you'll just use the Clojure command. And we've got some options as well, so we can set a whole bunch of Java options as well, because essentially it's kind of all it's doing is calling Java with some options and including Clojure main, which is Clojure itself. So that's the actual Clojure, it's the Clojure libraries and the REPL and all the code you need to be able to run Clojure, all in kind of a nice namespace. And then it passes in some optional arguments as well. So we don't need to go into those at the moment. And then there's some handy information online as well. So we've got Clojure running, and if we go back and look at the error that we got there, it's asking for us to install RL wrap. Oops. So let's do that. Sudo I think that's pretty much on the command line. So it's already in the Ubuntu software packages, so it just installs it. And there we go. Boom, 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 boom. So now we do clj -h just for help, and that's working. And if we want to run a REPL, we can just do clj, and it should run as a REPL. And it's going to use some default configuration that was put there during the install. If you remember that, so it's downloading Clojure 10.1 and from Maven. So you can see that Clojure CLI tools will also do sort of like dependency management for us, and we'll save these it'll save these downloaded jar files in your .m2 repository, just like using Leiningen and Boot do. And so yeah, we get the same experience, and then we can also do some editing. We can do some Clojure code now, so we can do the classic adding of numbers and close the brackets, and it's showing us when we close the parentheses, it's showing us it's matching where it's matching to. So in this case it's matching to the start parentheses, so that's really handy. And so you can see we press enter and we get the answer. Simple. So now we can change the world. Now we have a Clojure REPL. And if we want to quit, we can just do I think it's just Control-D to leave. There we go. So we've got our Clojure installed. That was pretty simple, pretty painless. Simple install script, and I think on Mac, yeah, he's just using brew. If you're familiar with that as well, if you prefer using that. Okay, let's jump back to the. That's not what I was looking for. That's the other. Boom. That's my pull request I was doing the other day. Where is it? No, that's that one. There we go. So that's it installed, and this article does go on. I mean, you can build it yourself as well if you want to. There's a lot of examples in programming the REPL. So once you've gone to get started, then really there should be a link to this programming in the REPL as well, and learn Clojure, and it'll kind of show you. This walks through how to do different things. This covers both the command line tools and some of the other editors and tooling and Leiningen and Boot as well. So that's a really good way to kind of delve into that. Let's just stay specifically with CLJ. So we basically installed it, and we can run Clojure just using the CLJ wrapper, and it gives us this nice simple REPL in the terminal. So we don't even need to worry about setting up an editor or anything like that. If we just wanted to do something quickly, or if we just wanted to show somebody how to get going with Clojure, we can start doing that very simply, just using these tools. And we can also do a script as well, so we can if we just want to run a particular little program we've shown, we can do that as well. We don't need to set up a particular project to do so. I mean, that's fairly easy to do anyway, but it just saves a little bit of work if you just want to show somebody what to do, or if you just need a quick hack around something. It's very easy to do, and you can also put an alias around any kind of particular tasks or jobs as well. So it's very easy to write some scripting stuff as well. So how does this all actually work? How did it know which version of Clojure to download and where to put it and so on? Well, one of the main configuration files is this deps.eden configuration file. And this is, as the name suggests, this is a configuration file that's defined using extensible data notation. And this is actually, if you weren't aware, this is the actual notation, the language that we use for Clojure itself. So Clojure itself is actually defined as an Eden based language, and there's some semantics on top of that Eden notation that actually make Clojure do things like the evaluation. So we take Eden, and then we just kind of add some rules on top of that to say, well, it's like, for example, the first thing in a list is going to be a function call. We add that on top, and pretty much we've got kind of our Clojure language. There's a really nice talk by Weavejester about this. I'll include a link to that video at the end of this broadcast. So there are a few places where you can put these deps Eden. So when we install something, then there's when I installed the Clojure thing just now, then it actually put this file, this deps Eden file, into Clojure deps Eden under user local lib Clojure. And this is what it looks like, or this is what it did look like on the one I did earlier. And so we've got a path, so it's going to look, whenever we run Clojure, it's going to look inside this source directory for any Clojure files. So if we did Clojure and then if we did Clojure and then a namespace, then it would look under source. It look for a folder called source, and then look for a folder that matched the namespace, and then run. Well, in this case, by default, it would run the -main function. We're defining some dependencies, so we refer to these as deps. That's where deps.eden comes along. So Clojure has a tendency to shorten some names. So rather than dependencies.eden, it's just deps.eden. It's fairly easy to get used to that term. And here we're just including org.clojure, which hopefully you can guess is the actual Clojure library itself. So again, this is why you don't need to install Clojure as a particular thing, because we're just using Clojure as a library here. And so here we're specifying the Maven version of that, and we're using the normal standard Maven coordinates as well. And it's very easy to specify that. If you ever want to know what a version is, you can go to clojars.org, and it will. You can then just search for a project. So if we do ring, there's probably a whole bunch of ring ones there. So if we go and look at ring core, then this lists the actual dependencies in the syntax for particular build tools. So like there's Leiningen and Boot version, and then there's obviously a specific one for Clojure.cli, and so it's ring core with the Maven version of 171. We'd put that into the depths list here. So this is basically a map of dependencies, which is a bit different from Leiningen, because that Leiningen used a vector of vectors. I think I prefer the depths map a little nicely, because you can specify the key. The key is the actual library, the dependency name you want to pull in, and the value of that is a map of the Maven version. And because this is a map, we can actually specify other things there as well. We can see later on, we can specify like something other than using Maven or a Maven version to pull in the particular version of this this library that we actually want. So it adds a bit more flexibility in that way to than Leiningen does. So these are so depths are our main dependencies that we're actually going to use with the application itself, and we can also include extra depths, which are so we can have aliases which include our extra depths. So these are our libraries we use for building the application and managing the application, but aren't part of the application itself. So in this case, we're using tools.depths. We might include some testing frameworks in there, and which again we wouldn't ship as part of the application itself. And here we're also including extra paths in there as well. So we've got a test directory in there as well. And we can also specify the repositories that we're going to use. So where is it going to pull down this dependency from? So here we've got the classic ones of Maven Central and Clojures. So these are common ones. These are ones that were built into tools like Leiningen already as well. And if you have your own local repository, or if you're using JCenter or other like caches or mirrors of repositories, because sometimes you don't always get 100% service from everything, so you don't want a single point of failure. It's nice to have like a local mirror, and you might have all your local dependencies put onto a local Artifactory or Nexus repository that you want to run, so you can actually keep them local inside the organization. So you would just add that as a place where you can get your Maven, your jar files, your Maven dependencies there. Okay, there's no questions so far. Hopefully everybody's enjoying it so far. If you do have any questions, please put them in the chat and I'll try and address them. So we've got Clojure installed. We've seen how it's picking up dependencies already. Just before we go, we can also put in dependencies if we've got dependency or some kind of configuration we want to apply to all of the projects that we work with. Then we can use this Clojure there's a .clojure file, a directory you can create, and in that we would put the file depseden, and this would be picked up and applied to to any project that we're running on this computer. So if you've got your own particular tooling or particular libraries that you use, which may not be included by the rest of the team, or some configurations you would need for your editor, then you would kind of put them into this global configuration for you, and maybe there is a global one for the team as well, and you just want to share these with the team. That's fine, but you would have a separate kind of repository to keep all those configurations in, because again, it's not specific to a project. And then inside a project, in the top level, you would put a dependency there, and that could specify It doesn't just have to specify one particular build of the application. You could specify a whole range of builds for different components, and so it is quite flexible in what you can do there as well. And so all the libraries that we pull down into, they're going to go into this. If it's a jar file that we're pulling down, then it's going to go into this M2 repository, which is the standard one. It's the one that obviously Maven uses, and Leiningen and other tools as well. So once you've downloaded these dependencies, you don't have to keep on downloading them each time unless you change versions or add new dependencies as well. So let's have a look at adding one. So let's go back to my terminal. Let me just copy that. Boom. Oops. I missed. There we go. I need a copy button on there. There we go. So we go in here. So we go into projects. I don't have any projects there. I'm just going to do let's make directory CLI. Clojure CLI. There we go. Let's pop into there. So I don't have any projects. There's nothing up my sleeve. I don't actually have any sleeves. There we go. Or very short ones. And we can just run Clojure here, and it will run a REPL. That's fine, but it's only really going to include what's in. So I've got all the features, all the functions that are inside Clojure itself. So I can like map ink over a collection of 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops, that's the wrong character. There we go. And then I can run that. But if I want to use other libraries, then I'd have to include them. So one way I could do that is create a deps-eden file. So I can just do. I'm just going to do, for example, I'm just going to make a directory called what time is it? I'm going to change it to that. And then I'm going to create a I wonder if my Emacs client works. I'm going to create a file called deps.eden and oh, there we did, excellent. And then I'm simply going to add a dependency here. So I'm adding a dependency on clj time, and this allows us to then call the functions on clj time library within inside my project. So if I save that, was it control hash? Oops, I didn't want to do that. Oops, I didn't want to do that. There we go. Yeah, there we go. So now I've got a file called deps-eden in here, and it's just got a dependency from that. And if I run the clj thing now it then pull in clj time, and if I don't have it in my local cache of Maven libraries, then it will download it, which I think it is doing, except it could not find it. Oops. Oops, there we go. So this is sometimes way over cache. Interesting. So it can't find that. Let me just have a look at. Let's have a look. CLJ time. So this is how we go and look up what is available. Let's have a look. CLJ time 15.1. Let's see, is there any older versions? I could try different versions, see if that would work. So this is the joy of working with dependencies. Sometimes like the versions just disappear or not there, which again is one reason why it's quite nice to have the flexibility of just being able to dip into a a Git repository and just use that instead. So I just changed the version now that was in here, and hopefully that can find that that version of that, although maybe not. Maybe this is not a good example of a library. No, I just couldn't find it. Oh dear, that's not good. Let's go back to where was that ring? Let's try and pull this one in. So we'll use ring instead. See if we do that. I'm not going to be able to do the demo I wanted to do, but there we go. There's the joys of live coding. So instead of that one, so if we're going to replace it. If we just want to add one, we'll just add it as a oops, not in there. We'll just add it as another key value pair. So we can add it here. And you can have multiple dependencies in here, and each dependency is the key for the name and the map of the version for the actual value in the map as well. Though we don't actually want clj time because it's causing us a problem, so let's just delete that for now. And then hopefully, I'm pretty sure ring must be there because it's such widely used. I'm not sure if clj time is as widely used anymore, because it's quite easy just to use Java time instead. So assuming I saved that, did I save it? Yes, I did. Let's see if we can behave this time. Let's see what will happen. There could be something wrong with Maven and Clojure's, but you'll be surprised if they're both down. Oh, there we go. So this is what it should be doing for clj time. I'm not sure why it's downloading clj time. Has it changed its name? Maybe it's changed its name, that's why it couldn't find. Oh, it's doing 14.3. Interesting. So we've got clj time there anyway, because ring is pulling it in as its dependency. So even though we've only added one dependency, then yeah, we've pulled in a whole bunch of other things as well. So yeah, it can be quite interesting. So we've got clj time. Okay, there we go. Maybe I can do the demo now, because although we didn't explicitly include it, it's pulling it in, and now it makes it available to us, I hope. I think. And we've also got Joda time as well. There we go. Okay, so that's, maybe it's just the earlier, maybe it's the 15 versions aren't available. Okay, okie dokie. So that shows you different ways to pull in dependency. Well, shows you how to pull in dependencies. It's all the same. So you can do that in. So there's the libraries I'm using for my project, and we can write code here. And so we could just write a simple bit of code to do. This is just going to tell us what time it is. So hopefully this will work, because ring is pulling in the clj time library, so we should still have clj core and format available in the require. So let's create a file. Let's go back to Emacs. There are other editors, of course, for Clojure. So we're going to create a file, and this file is going to have it's going to be named with respect to the namespace, and we've already seen that this configuration in Dependencies is looking for files in source src, so we'll need to put whatever we're going to do in there in source, and then if we just switch back a moment to here, we're actually doing something in a namespace called hello. So that file, oops, where are we? There we go, wrong button. So that file will need to be called hello as well, because the file name should match the namespace. So, and then it's a Clojure file, so we just do clj, and then if we press enter, and it's just asking us if we want to create. Well, it'll create them once once I save the file. It'll create my directory structure. There we go. So this is a really simple bit of Clojure code. So it's got two functions. We've got a namespace that's defining the scope of everything, and including clj time core and clj time format. I don't really like those. I'd change that to time and format, to be honest. I don't like single character aliases. But in this case, I'm not too worried about that. So we've got two functions, one called time string, time string, which returns a string representation of the date time in local time zone. And yes, the date time. Oh, we changed a lot of this, all the names in this, but never mind. And more importantly, we've got a main function, dash main. So this is the default function that will be looked for when we run this code. So we'll look in whatever namespace we supply to Clojure tools, and in that namespace by default it's going to look for a dash main, and we could configure it to kind of do other functions. We could have like a dash dev main as well, and we could specify that in our depth-eden what it's looking for. And all this function is doing is just doing a print statement, and then it's calling time string with the time now, which is a function from clj time, and this is just formatting it so the time looks pretty, basically. So let's save that, and let's go back to our command line. So we've got the code in there, and we just need to be able to call this now and specify the main function. So we can just do clj minus m hello, and we can either use clj or Clojure. It doesn't really matter in this case. We don't need the read line for to run this. So let's go back to the terminal. And so we don't actually want the REPL in this case. I was just using that as an example, so I'm going to Control D out of that. And then we can see our very minimal project structure is a depth file and our source file. So we do tree, no. Oh, I don't have tree installed. Oh, maybe not, I'll do that later. So if we just use Clojure, we can use Clojure or Clojure, and then we can specify m for the kind of main namespace, and that will be hello. And that should work if I remember rightly. Did I get that right? Yeah, there we go. And fingers crossed that all works and it picks up the dependencies through the ring dependencies we've added. There it goes, it works. Yay! That was a bit lucky. So it's 11.3 already. Okay, we're blasting through this. There's a lot more things I want to cover, but I think I'm going to cover that into a second broadcast. And let's see, let's switch back to what we're. So we've got a REPL we can run very easily, and by default it's using Clojure 10. If we wanted to use a different version of that, we could go back and set that. If we wanted to use a different version of Clojure, it was just a matter of either changing this installed depths, because that's where it's defined initially, or you could actually just put it into your Clojure .clojure file .depth-eden, and so that would affect all projects. And so one would override the other. So basically, when you run Clojure or CLJ, it's going to look at the install depths.eden, and then also like .clojure depths.eden, and then your project specific depths.eden, and it'll merge them all together and make a map. So it'll start with the local install, and then the global configurations, and then the local configurations. So if you have anything in here, then in this project specific one, that will override everything else, and the global ones will just override the installs, and so on like that. So you can, if they're different configurations, they'll complement each other and they'll still be there, but you can override kind of the install ones by the global ones, and then you can override both of those by project specific settings. Okay, and then we've seen that we can run a REPL, and we can also write a little bit of code and run that code straight away as well. So there's very little ceremony that we need to actually get going, and we can use local libraries and Git libraries as well. So again, it just makes that very easy to pull in. So if we have a look at the Clojure GitHub ones, I haven't done this myself, but you can see that the deps, the configuration we're doing in deps is the same really. So we're defining the name of the library that we want to pull in, and then we're specifying the version as the value. In this case, rather than using a Maven version, we're using a Git URL. So we're actually pulling in a Git URL of that, and if we want a specific commit, we can also specify that as well. So we can get really detailed about which specific version where we actually want to include, down to a specific commit that we're doing as well. So this is the if you're not that familiar with Git, this is basically the SHA unique value for that commit. So when we do a commit, it generates this really long number, and based on the time and the contents of that file. So again, this is always going to be completely unique within inside your project, and yeah, it gives you a way to just refer to a specific commit. It'd be interesting to see if there are, I wonder if you could use tags and other things like that. That's something to have a look at as well. But again, it's just it's the same configuration. You've got a name of your library and then the version of your library, and then you've got different options. The nice thing is you've got different options about what you can include, where you can actually include those libraries from. Cool. Yeah, oh, did I do a typo? Oh yes, there we go. Thank you very much. I did rush this a bit. We got it working in the end. It's always easier having other people spot your typos for you. Okay, so I mean that's kind of like the main things you actually need to get going. I mean, you can actually do stuff now. I mean, you would still, I think if you're doing a big project, you would still want an editor, so either Spacemacs or Atom or Visual Studio Code with Carver, or IntelliJ with Cursive. But you could use any editor you wanted to and write some code and write some simple Clojure scripts very easily, and get going. And if you just wanted, like, if you had half an hour to show your colleagues how to do some stuff with Clojure, I think that's a great way to do things as well. If you want a bit more wow factor, then you can include, well, you can include a cat, but that's not that might not be the big selling point. Hello, Pascal. But you can use rebel-readline as well to actually give you a very nice, almost giving you like the essential kind of experience of an IDE, but in the terminal window itself. And so I'll let you look at the video for homework, but it does cover a whole bunch of different things. You can have multi-line editing, completions, syntax highlighting, auto indenting, and it's even got it'll even show you the docs as well. So it gives you an awful lot of feedback as you're actually going through the development. So it does make writing code in the terminal more feasible. Obviously, you're doing this in the REPL, so anything you do will go once you've left that REPL, but it's going to keep all the history in there as well for you, so you can kind of very easily copy paste that, like the useful parts, into a file. And it's doing syntax highlighting as well, so it makes it easier to read the code that you're writing. And you've got the docs there as well, so you can understand what the functions are doing very quickly as well. So it's a really nice experience, and it's pretty easy to include as well. So it's just a matter of including some depths in there as well. I think I've covered that in this article here. Oops, that's not the right one. but I think it's just show you what it is doing. Yeah, so we can run it on the command line. So you can just run Clojure with depths in there, or you can just put what they're suggesting, recommending is you create in your depths.eden file. So in your global one, you can put this depths.eden configuration. So this alias. And it will basically, again, it's just a map you're defining with some extra dependencies and some options. So it's including a dependency you don't want to include in your application, but it's a dependency you want to use to build your application. And then this is how you actually run it. So it's including the main namespace, so that we can actually run that on there. And then all we need to do is just do Clojure -a, which is the option to include an alias, and then :rebel, which is the alias name. So the alias name is :rebel, and you can stack up multiple aliases there as well. You don't have to just use the single alias. So I'm going to skip that. I might do a session on that as well. But there's a really nice video. I mean, the video kind of goes and shows you exactly what to do. I think the best way to do it, if you want to use Clojure in the terminal, that's what I would strongly recommend, using rebel-readline. It's an excellent piece of work by Bruce Harmon, and I'm pretty sure there's some videos on Clojure TV as well about that. Oops, that's how to. There's all the videos I've been watching. There we go. So that's how we set it up. And there's also to kind of avoid, if you know what you want to build but you don't want to do all the work of configuring all the depths Eden files and so on, especially if you're going to use something like Figwheel, there is a very nice tool that Sean Caulfield built called clj-new. So this is a library that you can use with Clojure CLI tools, and what it'll do is it'll build you a project from it'll build you a project from the templates that are already well used in the Clojure community. So there's a whole series of Leiningen and Boot templates out there that you can use, and you can very quickly kind of just use those, and it will create a Clojure CLI tools specific, a depths Eden specific project for you from those Leiningen templates. Again, they're just templates, so it's very easy to, well, there's a little bit of work obviously went into the project, but it's for the end user, it's very easy for you to just take a Leiningen template and generate a CLI project from that. So what we're doing is creating an alias in here, so we can go in and edit our we can create a depths.eden file and put this in, and then we can start building some new projects in there. So let's go and switch to my little space max. So let's go and open, pretty sure I don't have one already. Oops, what am I doing? There we go. Oops, oh yes. What have I done? Forgotten how to use Emacs now. Why is that not working? Where are we? Sorry. There we go. Okay, so in .clojure, oh, I've got .clojure already. So we've got a depths Eden file in there. I think this would have been created when I first ran that's the CLI command tool, CLI command in the command line, because I didn't create this already. So this is just a sample one that it actually puts in the first time you actually run Clojure or CLI, and so it gives you some some ideas about what kind of things you can actually include into this file, so, and also where to include them as well. So as you can see, this is all just one single map. So it is a Clojure structure, so it's obviously quite handy if you're going to edit this to use a Clojure aware editor as well. So I can just paste that in there. Yeah, I can just paste that in there. into the aliases, because I think that's, yeah, there we go. Yeah. So this is alias, and this is going to pull in. This is going to create an alias called new. That is the alias name that we can use. And our extra dependencies are the clj-new file, and this is a clj-new library, and this is the version we're actually going to pull down, and this is how we actually run the main function from the library. So if we save that, then yep, then that's all we need to do. So we can then go back to our command line, and we can do things like we can go in and create a new, and we can use the kind of the built-in templates, because there's some built-in templates to here as well. So app is just like the Leiningen app as well, so it'll build like a little self-contained application with a little main, so you can call that as well. A library is if you're just going to build a library, and you can also use template to kind of generate your own template to build your own CLI template as well. So let's just check to see if this is working. Let's go back to my command line. I'm going to come out of that project. So we've got in here, this is where our projects go. So if I do clj, and then I'm going to use the alias of new, and I want to create an app. That's the template, and my first there we go. And so we need to qualify. So I kind of we need to have like a qualification for where it is. So I'm going to call it a practicalli. I'm all fingers and thumbs today. There we go. So let's do that. So this is going to create an application for us from the new template, and it's going to create a folder. It's going to create. Well, I looked at this before. I'm sure that works. Did I? What did I do wrong? Oops. That's not what I wanted. New things. Yeah. Let's just try the example again. Oops. Unless for some reason it's not pulling that down either. So we do new. We get new using the templates, and let's see if that's going to work. I got something wrong with my deps.eden file by the looks of things. Let's jump back to that. Did I? This is the joys of copy pasting something. So we got the paths, we got the aliases. Oh, that shouldn't. Yes. Okay, yes. Oops. That should not be in a, because we've got a map with inside a map, but no qualification as that. So we actually just need to raise this up. Raise. There we go. Oops. Oh, I didn't want to do that. That's not the editing I wanted. Let's just undo that for a second. So I just want to unwrap this. I'm just going to unwrap that from there. There we go. So we're going to create a new alias, which we've done there, and so this will go into, yes, this just goes into the top level key of the map of aliases, and that alias has a new aliases. Make that. There we go. New alias, and that is going to have the dependencies and the main options. Okay, that should work. Let's try that again. There we go. So again, that's why it's useful to have a Clojure editor and to read the instructions properly. Fingers crossed it's going to work. There it is. So it's because we're using a template, because we're using clj-new, it's downloading a whole bunch of dependencies for that. And because the clj-new deals with templates and Maven and all that sort of stuff, there's quite a few dependencies here. So if kind of downloading dependencies does scare you, then please look away. And you only have to do this once, but you can see like the complexity of dealing with Maven and all the different kind of options there are around that as well. Dealing with XML, there's a lot of work gone into making Maven as powerful as it is. So therefore, there's a lot of libraries, quite a lot of libraries to actually help it work okay. And we're doing HTTP requests as well, and processing the XML, and doing security as well, because you might have HTTPS security around your repository, which I hope you do. And it was even get some Amazonia as well. Oh, there we go. And that's done it. So obviously the next time I do this, it'll be a lot quicker. So we've created a my app in there, and if we go and have a look inside my app, then we've got the depths of Eden, we've got the source and test directories. So it's very similar to what we would create with Leiningen. I think the main difference is instead of a project.clj file, we've got a depths.eden file. So this does give us a data way of defining our project. The project.clj file in Leiningen is very declarative, but it's still a Clojure program, as it were. Whereas depths.eden is just purely a data configuration file. So it's a lot simpler, a lot cleaner, but still very flexible in what you can do, because data is behavior and vice versa in Clojure anyway. So if we have a look at the depths.eden, so it's pretty simple. We've got paths, so it's adding resources to the paths, as well as like the general source one we're doing as well. So it's going to pick up anything we put in resources. And so if we want to put in like JSON files or images or HTML code and stuff like that, we'll put that in resources. And we've got the alias. So we've got the alias here. So this is the project one. So we've got alias to run tests, and this app template includes this Cognitech test runner. So you can actually run the tests in your application on the command line, and so again you can very easily and very quickly get going with unit-based tests, and you can also use this, I think, for spec as well. And you can see this is using a Git URL, so we're pulling this test runner from Git, and so as long as this repo is there, then it's going to be available. And then we've got a specific commit that we're pulling from. So I assume this is the latest stable one that was done when we created this template. And this is just how the test runner actually works itself. So that's all pretty simple, I think. There we go. Anything else in there that's worth looking at? Obviously we've got the source and the tests. Let's switch over to SpaceMix. Let's go to. That's not working for some reason. Practicalli projects Clojure CLI my app. And then we've got the source, my name, which is the namespace, and my app. There we go. So you can see it's using my name, my app, for the namespace, and we've got gen class, which we need to have for to run this on the command line, and we've got our def main dash main function, which will run when we run this application. So it's a proper application. We can just run this on the command line. We could also ship this up as well. There is a project, if I remember rightly, I haven't added this yet, but another Sean Cofield project. I think it's called Depstar. Let's see if I've got that right. Possibly Depstar. Oh, there we go. Oh, it's there. Oops, there we go. There we go. So this, I believe this will create like Uber jars for you as well. So if you want to ship your application, you can use Depstar, and it's the shape of a very similar sounding thing inside Star Wars. I think that's different enough to get away from any copyright, so that's good. And yeah, this is you can just add this as an alias as well. So if you wanted to create an Uber jar, you would just add depstars to that, and you could deploy this just as a jar file in there as well as an Uber jar. So it would include Clojure. So all you would need is just any kind of like suitable Java environment, so Java 8 and above, and you could just be able to deploy this in the class path on that server, and off you go. So it's very straightforward and simple. So I'll add that to the to this blog as well. So it's really easy to create an application. The ones I've been using most are for like figwheel-main. If I'm doing Clojure script developments, I can create a template using figwheel-main, which is a newer version of Figwheel that has long been used for Clojure script projects. And so we can basically just it gives us a command line here for creating a new project, and we can inject reagent into that as well. And you can see we're just using the clj-new alias here, so you wouldn't need that installed in your .clojure deps Eden file, and then you can just create a project in there as well. So we can actually do that here as well. Boom. Let's do that. It's always good to do things live. So I'm going to come out of my apps. So I'm just in the top of that root, and just paste that command in. Oops, I missed the clj. I missed the start of that. There we go. Yeah, so we can run. So we're going to create a new project using the new alias. It's going to use the template figwheel-main. It's going to be called Hello World, and the main namespace is going to be core. And we're going to pass in an option into the template to say, oh, we want to add the reagent library as well. So let's press enter there. Boom. And this will also take a few seconds to do, because I think it's the first time I've done it on this computer. So while that's doing that, let's just have a look at some other things that are quite useful to look at. And I can hear my computer going a little bit faster. And so there's I've added a little piece here. I'll put this as a separate article actually, as how to run a fig wheel with Emacs Spacemacs. There's just a just a setting you can do to tell it which alias to use, because we're going to create a project that's going to use this a.fig alias just to include the fig wheel libraries, and there's just my experience in doing that as well, which I'll put into a separate file. But there's some other interesting references here down the bottom, and I guess the most one I'm familiar with is Edge, which I haven't learnt yet, but I keep promising Dominic that I'll get around to learning. And Edge is a kind of opinionated way to build a Clojure. So you can either build a Clojure or a Clojure script or a full stack application, and it gives you a lot of insight in how Jux do it, and what they kind of recommend in how to build it as well. And does it have any instructions? Yes. Oh yeah, documentation. There we go. And so we've got documentation. Oops, a little bit big on here. There we go. And so yeah, we can start. It's like talks about installing Clojure's command line tools, how to set up your editor, and creating your first component as well. So you can create multiple different builds for different components within inside Edge as well. So this is quite it's quite a big step up from what we've covered, but it's certainly a lot of interesting things you can go and look at. So you basically clone the repository and clone the Edge repository, and you can also include things for you can create it, then you create an app with inside Edge as well using some of the scripts that they've got, and then off you go. You're kind of running that as well. So it's all using aliases and different dev builds as well. So if you've got projects with Clojure scripts and Sass, then you've got some different aliases to just if you're just using just normal Clojure as well. So it's a very kind of flexible mechanism, but there's a few things to kind of learn there as well, and it's including rebel-readline as well, and some examples of how to run that from Emacs and so on. So hopefully that should have done that. So that's working. Oh, there we go. So that downloaded the internet for me in terms of dependencies. And again, I'm sort of going to do that once, so I don't need to worry about doing that again. So everything else will be, next time I do a project, it'll be really fast. And it's also showing me how to, so I want to change it into the directory we've just created and then run Clojure fig build. And I think this is specifying Clojure specifically because if we do a REPL here, it's going to include the rebel-readline, which doesn't work well if we call it with CLJ because it's going to clash with the RL wrap readline. So let's cd into hello world. I think once we've done this, we should wrap it up, and then we're going to so we're going to run Clojure REPL, and we're going to use the alias fig, which is going to pull in the dependencies of figwheel library, so it'll actually work. And we're also running the build alias as well. So we've got two aliases here. We've got fig and build, and so you can chain all those up together for as many as you want. And Clojure CLI will just use all those aliases to run the project. So now this should spin up, and it should hopefully give us a running application on ClojureScript, and it should open up a browser to show us when that is actually fully running. And then we can go in, and we'll also have the command line, which is using rebel-readline, and so we can actually go in and hack around on the website and do different things on the website. And see our changes live in action. I am actually doing this. I'm using this approach for the. I'm going to rewrite the Clojure study guide video guide that I'm creating. I'm going to use this figwheel-main and Clojure CLI tools to do that. Again, it's a nice lightweight approach, and it will be interesting to kind of see this in action as I do it. This is the only this is an interesting thing with doing this on a so I'm doing this on a laptop I only use for broadcasting, so it doesn't have any of these libraries already downloaded. So if it was on a development laptop I'm using every day, then I probably have most of these dependencies already. I think, has it stopped? I think it stopped. I think it's now building the project, hopefully. And then it will fire up and then it opens up a browser and connects to the browser. Okay, there we go, my figwheel-main even is ready. Oh, while it's doing that, let's kind of have a look and see what it's actually created. So let's go back. So we want hello world core. So it created this folder called hello world core, and inside we've got git ignore in there, so it's not going to we're not going to accidentally put in mistaken files. We've got our deps.eden. So this is a little bit bigger than before. Oh, there we go, it's working. Oh, there we go, exciting times. There we go, hello world. So that's my application running. And so if I had all those dependencies, that would only take like a few seconds to actually get going. So it would be really quick to show other people and actually start on. So if you've got an idea about what you want to do, you can just boom, just do that one command, and off you go, and you can start editing the code straight away. So this is a deps.eden file. This is the main one it's created for the overall project. So we've got Clojure in there, we've got Clojure script because this is a Clojure script project. We've got reagent because we asked it to add it. It's adding the resources thing in there, so we can put, because we're going to have some HTML in our resources directory. And we've got the extra dependencies to help us build this. As I mentioned, we've got rebel-readline and figwheel-main, and we've got a target because that's where we're actually going to generate the JavaScript from our Clojure script, which will be injected into the browser. And we've got a few different builds as well, so different ways of building it. So we did see that we called this with the alias fig, so it's going to pull in all that configuration, and the alias build, it's also going to pull this. This defines some options about how we're actually going to build it. So in previous aliases, we've seen that we only had the extra deps we were pulling in, and then just how it would be run, like the main ops. Here we've got several different ways of running the same libraries, basically different ways of running figwheel, different builds as it were. So we've got the normal build called build, and this is just using figwheel-main, but we're specifying this dev build as well. So there's probably a dev.deps.eden file somewhere that has some additional config that we're pulling in. And this is called min, so this is going to minify our application. So this is using figwheel-main, but it's going to do some advanced compilation. So it's going to get rid of, it's going to do dead code analysis for us and delete any JavaScript that is actually never called. But this is also running the dev profile as well. And this one is quite different. The test is quite different because it's going to run it's going to look at the test.cljs.eden file, and it's going to use the hello world test runner on that. So that's doing something quite different. We can also look at the other files. So we've got this dev.cljs.eden, which is what the build and min are actually going to also call. So this is another configuration for the specific build aliases that we're going to pull in. And it's just defining here some particular watch directories. So Figwheel is going to look at these directories, and if there are changes, it's going to basically recompile all the changes and push any of the relevant changes up to the browser and see what's going on there. We're defining something called a CSS directory, so we're telling Figwheel where to look for a CSS, and we could have different CSS for like a dev build versus a live build, because we might have different releases of that. And here we've got some auto testing true, so testing is always running, and we're specifying the main namespace of our application. And if we look at test, this will be quite different because we're doing something quite different as well, where it's opening up a different port, and it's running this test.html page, so we can actually see the results of that test running. And I wonder if we can do that then. Let's look. So we've got here, we've just got localhost Does this work? I haven't tried this yet, but there is a test.html. Is that working? Yeah, we've got test host page. Nothing on there yet, but we've got a separate page for testing results that we can include there as well, and that's been defined in this other depths, other Eden configuration file. And then I think there is figwheel-main Eden file as well, and this is just setting up some general configuration for Emacs as well, which I don't think there's anything there. There's nothing enabled by default. But you might want to override different ports and so on. So if you want to run multiple projects, you might want to specify a different port so you can run them at the same time on like different applications, different figwheel applications on the same machine at the same time. Ooh, there we go. And we are over time, but let's see if there's anything else that we can cover. If any questions? No, there aren't any questions. So it's pretty easy to get going. Where did we get to with our REPL there? And you can see we've got our syntax highlighting with readline REPL. So I've typed map and done a space, and it's giving me underneath. It's like it's popped up the function signature in there, so I know how to actually what arguments that map is actually going to take. So it makes it really nice to help you learn a lot of the core functions, and because you can very easily kind of see what arguments you're supposed to pass without having to evaluate the code and being told that it's wrong. So it's very easy to to get going and do some coding in here as well. Does it pick up? It even picks up JavaScript stuff as well. If I remember my code rightly, I think. Let's do that. There we go. Hello from the REPL. There we go. So that's the kind of interactive nature of things. Obviously, I'd probably do, if I was going to do some editing, what I normally do is have the browser at one side of the screen, and then the REPL or or Spacemacs, the editor, at the other side. Or if I've got multiple screens, then I'll have obviously one on one screen and one on the other as well. So that way you can kind of see exactly what it's doing, and Figwheel will live update the code as you're actually working with it as well. Okay, well, I hope that gave you a nice insight into using Clojure command line tools. I'll tidy up this blog, and I'll put the Spacemac specific stuff into another blog as well. This gives you a nice kind of introduction into getting going. Hopefully it's given you enough confidence to try it out on any next project, and we'll leave it there. So again, thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed learning about Clojure and Clojure CLI tools, and I will see you next time. If you have any suggestions about what you'd like to cover, then please let me know. I certainly want to go into a bit more work around the Clojure CLI tools as well, and show you some more examples of that. So we'll cover those as well. Okay, thank you very much, and see you next time. Thank you. Bye bye.